Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves. Today we're looking at the in-flight connectivity sector. There's been a major announcement about adoption that really clarifies things. Our goal here is to quickly pull out the essential knowledge which companies stand to gain and which might face some new competitive challenges based on what we're seeing.
Yeah, the whole picture for aviation connectivity is certainly changing. I mean, for years, airlines used tech way up in geostationary orbit, GEO, or, just air to ground over land. But now there's a real move towards low Earth orbit, LEO, for that in-flight connection, what's often called IFC. Understanding that basic tech difference, LEO versus GEO, is pretty central to grasping the market moves.
Okay, so let's nail down the event that brought this into focus. The main headline is United Airlines getting FAA approval for Starlink on its Boeing 737-800s.
That's the one. And it's happening soon. The material mentions a specific target date. The first paid flight with this new setup is aimed for October 15th. Looks like it's starting out of the NYC Newark area, so that gives everyone a concrete timeline to watch.
Right, a hard date. And this wasn't totally out of the blue for United, was it? They'd sort of dipped their toes in already.
Exactly, you're right. United had already gotten FAA nods for Starlink, but that was on their smaller Embraer 175 regional jets. That was earlier this year. Getting it for the 737-800, though, that's different. That's a workhorse, a mainline plane. Putting Starlink there suggests the tech is, well, ready for wider use, ready to scale across their main routes. That's when competitors really start paying attention.
Let's get to the core of it then.
Yeah.
Why are airlines doing this? I mean, if the old Wi-Fi sort of worked, why go through the expense of retrofitting planes? This must be about the passenger experience.
It really boils down to latency, the delay. With LEO, the satellites are just much, much closer to Earth. That closeness cuts down the signal travel time dramatically, the latency. An older GEO system might have, say, 600 milliseconds of delay, maybe more. Which is okay for maybe sending a basic email, but if you're trying to do a video call or use a secure VPN for work, it often feels painfully slow or just, doesn't work properly.
Okay, and LEO flips that completely.
Pretty much. LEO systems can bring that latency way down. We're talking maybe under 100 milliseconds, sometimes even closer to 50. That's a huge difference in usability. It allows for that faster, more reliable Wi-Fi, often offered for free now, which is a big selling point for the airline. It lets United, that's ticker UAL, claim that sort of first mover status on these key 737-800s. They're selling a better experience based on speed.
And when one airline gets that kind of technological edge, the pressure shifts immediately to rivals, doesn't it? Like Delta, ticker DAL. They now have to think about matching that experience, especially where they fly the same routes. Business travelers might just pick United for the better Wi-Fi.
Yeah, Delta definitely feels that pressure. But the material does point out something potentially helpful for them. Delta also operates a very large fleet of Boeing narrow-body jets. So if they decide, okay, we need to match this, having so many similar planes might actually make a fleet-wide rollout of a comparable ATRO system a bit easier, maybe faster, than for an airline with lots of different plane types.
Okay, so United and potentially Delta are benefiting or reacting. Let's follow the money down the supply chain. When United decides to modify hundreds of planes, someone has to do the actual work, install the hardware. That creates demand. We could probably group the winners here, maybe starting with the companies doing the cabin retrofits and providing interior parts, the ones installing the Starlink kits.
Makes sense. Yeah, when you put a new antenna, a radome on top of a plane, you need specialized engineering, specific mounting hardware, power systems, all that. Astronics, ticker ATRO, seems well-placed here. Their business is in IFC, cabin power systems, aircraft integration, so they're likely seeing demand for the engineering work and for selling the actual installation hardware. Sometimes these are bundled as STC kits, supplemental type certificate kits.
And then there's HEICO, ticker HEI. Maybe less obvious.
Right, but important. HEICO, they have this huge catalog of FAA-approved parts. Not the big antenna itself, maybe, but all the critical bits and pieces needed to connect everything safely and meet regulations. Think connectors, wiring harnesses, special brackets, structural bits. The expectation is they'll see more orders for these kinds of parts tied directly to how many planes get these Starlink installs.
Okay, let's go another level down. The material mentions high-value aircraft components makers. Thinking about huge companies like TransDigm, ticker TDG. Is installing an antenna really going to move the needle much for a company that size?
That's a fair question. For a giant like TransDigm, maybe one program like this doesn't totally change their earnings picture overnight. But it's more about the signal it sends, right? It shows where airline capital spending is going. Their parts, things like fittings, latches, various mounts in the cabin, and structure the demand for those can tick up consistently with each plane that gets retrofitted across these big 737 fleets. It just confirms that trend of spending on aftermarket upgrades is picking up steam.
And even materials companies get pulled in.
Oh, yeah. Someone like Hexcel, ticker HWM. They make advanced materials, fasteners, structural components used in aerospace. They'd likely see increased demand for specialized aerospace-grade fasteners and maybe some structural elements needed when you're doing these kinds of modifications across many aircraft. It just shows how a decision like United's spreads demand through the supply chain, even down to component suppliers.
Okay, so that clear pickup in demand for LEO installations leads us to the other side of the coin. The company's facing maybe some competitive difficulties, and the core issue seems pretty straightforward. This newer LEO tech performs better, and it's displacing the older, slower stuff.
That's the heart of it. And the vulnerability really starts with the existing legacy in-flight connectivity providers. Take Viasat, ticker VSAT. They face a pretty direct challenge here. Their main aviation connectivity business could lose contracts or face pressure wherever airlines decide Starlink is the way forward. Contract churn is a real risk.
Why is it particularly tough for Viasat? What's the specific pressure point?
Well, because IO offers a better product, technically speaking, that low latency we talked about often at a price that's very competitive. So Viasat is likely facing some serious pricing pressure just to keep the contracts they have for their older GEO capacity. The airline has a choice. Stick with the slower system that might frustrate passengers or upgrade to something modern that handles video calls, VPNs, all that high-demand stuff. It's not an easy position for Viasat.
And GoGo, ticker GOGO, is also in a tricky spot, but maybe for slightly different reasons.
That's right. GoGo's history is strongly tied to air-to-ground, or ATG, connectivity, using ground towers that works great over, say, the continental U.S. But airlines increasingly want one single connectivity solution that works everywhere their planes fly over oceans, globally. LEO systems naturally offer that global coverage. So GoGo's ATG system, which is limited geographically, becomes less appealing for big global airlines looking for that standardized fleet-wide solution.
And this pressure doesn't just stop at the service providers, right? It goes deeper to the companies that actually own the satellites. The GEO satellite capacity sellers.
Yeah.
We're talking about companies like EchoStar Hughes, ticker SATES, and Telesat, ticker TSAT.
Yeah, and this is where you see potentially significant capital risk. For EchoStar Hughes, the data traffic they sell for aircraft use starts to look vulnerable. As airlines test LEO and then start moving large amounts of passenger data traffic over to those LEO systems, it just pulls demand away from those GEO satellites.
For these companies, it's not just about losing one customer contract, is it? It's about the value of these massive, expensive satellites they already have in orbit.
Exactly. The whole economic model for their GEO capacity comes under strain. Modern passengers want low latency for things like streaming and video calls. GEO tech just can't really compete on that performance metric for those uses. So if the most valuable aero data contracts start moving to LEO, well, these GEO operators could face having satellite capacity that's just not earning what they expected, possibly for years before the satellite is retired. Stranded capacity is a real concern.
Okay, one last group to consider. The big, established avionics companies that have their own IFEC divisions, the ones that often supply a lot of the plane systems.
Right, the incumbents. You're thinking of players like Raytheon Technologies, ticker RTX, specifically their Collins Aerospace unit, and also Honeywell, ticker HON. They often offer their own integrated connectivity packages as part of a bigger suite of avionics. But if an airline chooses a third-party LEO system like Starlink instead of the Collins offering, well, then Collins' connectivity part of the deal risks getting displaced on that fleet.
So it becomes a share a wallet problem for them. They might sell the airline other systems, but they lose out on the connectivity piece during a big upgrade cycle.
That's a good way to put it. Honeywell is in a similar boat, competing with its own SATCOM and IFSC products. When Starlink gets chosen, it can mean the scope of the upgrade work Honeywell gets on certain programs gets smaller. If the airline goes third party for the antenna and service, it just reduces the overall potential revenue for those incumbent avionics providers on that specific fleet upgrade. They're still major suppliers, but that slice of the pie gets challenged.
All right, so if we wrap this up, based on the material, there seems to be a clear pattern emerging from this one key airline decision. We see positive momentum for the airlines trying to get an edge with passengers and for that whole aerospace supply chain that supports the physical retrofits from the integrators down to the component makers.
Yeah, the retrofitters, the hardware suppliers.
And conversely, the ones feeling the squeeze are the providers of the older GEO and air-to-ground tech, and perhaps the big avionics players who risk losing out on some of that upgrade business.
That seems to be the main dynamic described. The legacy providers and the GEO satellite owners face the most direct pressure from the performance advantages of EO. I suppose the final thought here, for you, the listener, is just noticing the breadth of the impact from one decision. This material really highlights how a choice by one major airline about which Wi-Fi system to install can send demand signals rippling through the entire supply chain. It affects everything from huge satellite investment plans down to the order books for nuts and bolts.
This analysis is not financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. This content is purely the opinion of the author of the material reviewed.